Join over 24,000 of some of the fastest growing companies.
Wherever you are, make it TFR. Truth Frequency Radio.
And hello and welcome to the Revolutionary Radio Project. I'm your host, Rob Skiba. Excited to get started this evening. Thank you guys so much for joining us here on the Truth Frequency Radio Network. My guest this evening is Joseph G. Jordon. We're going to be talking about UFOs and aliens. I got that in quotes here, air quotes, aliens and so-called alien abduction scenarios and things of that nature. Actually, stuff that I used to talk a lot about back in the I used to do a lot of. I kind of got away from that over the years, but excited to get back into it again this evening because Joe is considered by many to be among one of the experts in this field, albeit coming at the subject matter from a different perspective than most, that being a Christian perspective. Joe is a 27-year member of the Mutual UFO Network, the world's oldest, largest, all-volunteer, not-for-profit civilian UFO investigation and research organization, currently serving as the MUFON National Director for South Korea, a MUFON Rapid Deployment Star Team member, and a member of the MUFON Inner Circle. By profession, Joe is a safety professional for an American contractor company supporting the United States in South Korea, where he has worked and lived for the past 10 years. Joe is also the head of CE4 Research Group, an investigative research group that studies the so-called alien abduction phenomenon from a Christian perspective. The research findings of CE4 Research Group, the most powerful evidence in the world today of the true nature of the entities behind the so-called alien abduction experience, have been published in over 37 authored books in the past 2 decades. Joe Jordon, along with new member of the CE4 Research Group is Jason December of Huntington Beach, California, have just released their new book, Piercing the Cosmic Veil. You Shall Not Be Afraid of the Terror by Night, where the published findings of CE4 Research Group lean more toward the likelihood of the visitors being of an interdimensional or spiritual nature rather than extraterrestrial biological entities. Their book is now available for order on Amazon in paperback as well as in Kindle format. Joe Jordon and the CE4 Research Group are now doing video interviews with experiencers showcasing their testimonies on their new show, the Piercing the Cosmic Veil Show, here on YouTube. So it is my pleasure to welcome for the first time to the Revolutionary Radio Project, Joe Jordon. Hey, Joe. How you doing, man?
Rob, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, good to have you. It's been a long time coming, bro. We've chatted back and forth on Facebook for quite some time, but I've never actually had you on the show before. I can't believe it, considering the subject matter. I've had lots of other people that you and I both know, but I'm excited to finally have you on this evening.
Long time. Glad to be here.
Yeah, right on. So, we just spoke briefly just before we got on the air here just to do sort of a sound check. So, I don't know a whole lot about you other than, some of the videos that I've seen on YouTube, of course, and some of the interaction we've had on Facebook. So for my benefit, as well as for the benefit of my listeners who may not be familiar with you or your work, why don't you go ahead and tell us a bit about yourself, your testimony, how you came to a relationship with Jesus Christ, and what led you into this type of research and activity of all things.
Well, it was kind of an accident getting into this field to begin with. I didn't have an interest in ufology at all when I got introduced to this subject matter. I was on a vacation trip headed to see my brother up in Alaska, and I was looking at a 10-hour flight from out of Orlando, Florida, headed to Anchorage, and I needed something to read on the flight. This was back in the early 90s, before we had all the high technology that would pass the time for, somebody like us in our younger days. And I was an avid science fiction reader when I was younger, so I figured I'd go pick up a book in the local kiosk in the airport looked at the magazines, looked for a book, and finally come across one particular book that caught my attention. It read like a science fiction book. I picked it up, turned it around, looked at the back side of it, and it puzzled me for a minute because the front looked like a science fiction book, but the backside read like science research book. And that puzzled me because I knew as a science fiction reader, a lover of fiction, that fiction was escapism. It was an opportunity to get away from reality, to especially science fiction. Science fiction, you could put yourself on those other worlds in a future setting and just escape the worries and the troubles of life, here on planet Earth, for whatever time you spend in that book. And then when you're done, you come back to those realities and things you got to deal with on a daily basis. But that was a time to just get away. But you knew what it was. It was just that little bit of time to escape. But it wasn't real. It was just fiction. It was just a moment to step aside. But this book grayed that line, that black line that should be there between reality and fiction. And it wasn't solid black, this book. So that is what caught my attention. So I bought the book, I started reading it, and this is what led me down the rabbit hole. It was this book, and it was the UFO crash at Roswell. And that opened the door for me into this field. I had no interest in UFOs, flying saucers. To me, that was all fiction. That was all science fiction. I didn't follow any of the stuff that was in the news or in, tabloids on science, on flying saucers at the time. Just wasn't part of my, my everyday thing. I was working at a boat company at the time, blue collar worker. Been working there quite some years. I was helping raise my son. That wasn't part of my life until I read this book. And then when it did, all it did was open up a ton of questions that I just had to have answered because none of this made sense. How could this possibly be? How could whatever that I had accepted as being fiction, how could it possibly be anything related to reality? So I was on a quest. I had to go find out what this was about. Because obviously there were a lot of people involved in it that I was not aware of up until the time I read this book. When I came back from the trip, I was exposed to a news article on the local TV channel there out of Orlando, which showed a guy that had just opened up a UFO museum in downtown Orlando on International Drive. And if anybody's been to Orlando, to the tourist areas there, to the, Universal Studios and Disney and SeaWorld and all of that, International Drive is where all of this stuff is located, all the attractions and the restaurants and, the theme parks and all that. So he happened to be set up right there because, when you open up a business like this, location, that's everything. So he went for it. He put it right there in the middle of all of it. He figured he was going to go after the tourists. And he got him a place in a little tiny strip mall there, very high dollar, second floor. And the way the museum was set up, as they showed it on this, this news thing, it was like a walkthrough, like in a grocery store, aisle upon aisle upon aisle. And what he had done was take all of the magazines, news articles, different types of information that he could gather. And it was like a walkthrough history of the UFO phenomenon. And you start out from the oldest and walk all the way up to the newest. And he was always adding to the museum. So I figured this is a place I could go learn about this phenomenon. And if this guy was as educated as it seemed he was on this subject matter, I could go ask him questions. So first opportunity I got on a Saturday, I took a trip over early Saturday morning, and I went over to this store, this museum, and I figured I'd take a walk through and get an opportunity to talk to this guy and ask him questions if it wasn't busy. Well, the Saturday I went over, it wasn't too busy. I went through, looked at everything I could, consumed as much as I could, got to the end, and I came out, and there was this, like book rack he had with all sorts of books and magazines, UFO related. And I'm looking at all of these to see if there was anything else I might want to pick up and read too, educate myself. And there were some things there that puzzled me too. And it wasn't until much later that I realized what that was about. But definitely some strange magazines that just didn't seem to go right with what the subject matter was. But I'd learn later what that was. But I did get a chance to talk to him and tried to ask some, pertinent questions that I wanted answered right away. And the more questions that I asked, the more answers I got, but the more questions that would come up. Mm-hmm. And ended up, I would make 3 or 4 more trips over there to talk to this guy, and ended up becoming pretty good friends. He was a local, actually, lived in Orlando. He actually worked at a company there in Orlando. He just retired from a major company. And he was involved with MUFON for many years. He was actually their state section director for Orange County, which is where Orlando is located. And as he saw my interest growing in this, as I was learning more and more, he said, would you like to be involved in an organization where you can do research yourself? It looks like you're wanting to do more and more. And besides, other people filling you with information, how about just being part of the research, doing it yourself? And I said, well, what are you talking about here? And that's when he introduced me to how MUFON works and their structure and the organization, how it all comes together to help people that are involved as members of MUFON. And I said, wow, that's quite a setup. And he says, yeah, it's voluntary, and you can be a member. I can work you up to a field investigator, where you have the opportunity yourself to go out on investigations where sighting reports come in, and you get the call, and they send you out to do the follow-up on the interviews and document all the evidence that comes in, the sighting research itself that's involved with the sighting report, and document it and get the cases turned in and put on file. I thought, wow, that'd be great. So went through the process with him. He got me signed up with MUFON as a journal subscriber. That's the basic level. Next thing he did was get me set up to where I could work my way up into becoming a field investigator, and got the field investigator's manual, studied it, took the test for it, and he actually trained me up on how you go about doing it, a field investigator follow up on a case. Once a sighting would come in, he took me through the steps on how you'd go out and actually talk to the people, and the process you'd go through and the paperwork you'd fill out. Now it's all different. Now if you got a sighting, you actually do the paperwork yourself on the MUFON website at MUFON.com. And then once you fill the paperwork out yourself, then it's taken from your location and it's fed down through the channels through the computer, and it's your sighting report goes to wherever whoever's in charge at your area of location, and then that call is made to a person that's in your area, and they come and respond, and they'll talk to you and do a follow-up. So it's a lot easier now than it was 20 years ago. And we had 10 pages of report we had to fill out by hand and send in.
So is MUFON just strictly a civilian volunteer organization, or is it somehow connected with any government agencies or any kind of hierarchy?
No, it's all civilian and voluntary. And it's got, you have at your resources in MUFON a level that is people that are on the research level, that are consultants, that are master degrees, PhDs in specific fields of study, where if you need to call on somebody of a particular knowledge field, you need a physicist to help you in a case, you can get a hold of MUFON management and say, hey, I need a physicist, I need somebody in metallurgy, I need somebody in geology. They can go into that realm of membership, people that they have on the consultant level that are voluntary members, and they can use their expertise and their knowledge to help you in your case. So all of this is at your fingertips, that you have. You don't have to have all that knowledge. As working as a group and having that knowledge as all members also, they're there to help you as a grassroots field investigator that's doing the footwork. If you need you need that level of expertise, it's there to help you do the case. So it's quite a setup. And it's much better now because of the communication levels that we have compared to 20 years ago. Everything's just a phone call away, whether you're within the same state or you're halfway around the world.
Interesting. So you get hooked up with this group. Now, of course, people in the chat room are asking questions. Is this related to Freemasonry? Or I thought MUFON has been infiltrated. I'm seeing different comments in the chat room there. I don't know anything about any of that. Care to respond to such comments?
Yeah. Is it infiltrated? It's free to join by anybody. So, what would you call infiltrated? Some people say it's infiltrated by Christians. Some people say it's infiltrated by Muslims.
Right. Depends on your perspective, I suppose.
I guess it's from your perspective, Other people say it's infiltrated by New Agers. Who cares? The way I look at it is bring every perspective into it. Let's give everybody a chance to look at it from every perspective. Because my theory on this whole thing is we need every perspective to look at this phenomenon, because every perspective is a piece of the puzzle that needs to be brought to the table. And we can't look at it from just one perspective, because if you do that, you're probably missing a lot of pieces of the puzzle, and you're not going to get the actual picture of what this phenomenon really is. I think it needs to have every piece from every perspective to get a true picture of what we're dealing with here. And I think that's why we don't have a true picture of what we're dealing with. I think that's why we don't have disclosure yet, because they don't have an answer of what we're truly dealing with. You got one group over here that says this is what it is. You got another group over here that says this is what it is. You got a group in the middle that says, no, it's not them two at all. It's this. Who knows? Maybe it's a mixture of all three or none of it all.
Yeah, I went to the Contact in the Desert conference out there in California. I don't think it was last year. I think it was the year before. This is the stack of DVDs. I don't know if you can see, but these are all the presentations that were there. I got all of them. Of course, there's many going on at the same time, so there's no way you can go to all of them. You just got to pick the ones you think you're interested in and go to it, and then maybe get the DVDs of the other one. But even of the ones that I did attend, of course, then later I watched a lot of these discs. There definitely is a lot of different perspectives, although one of the things I didn't really see represented there was the Christian perspective. That's got to be the minority view probably these days, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and it seems, for whatever reason, I don't know, it's getting to be more of a minority anywhere you go, or like I said, for whatever reason. But there is a presence in MUFON, I will tell you that. And a president that reaches all the way to the top. It's kind of silent, which is okay, but we keep our presence. I know who they are, and we stay within, and we keep going. We keep our research there. I've had a voice. I've had an opportunity to share my research the past 27 years with 5 of the last executive directors that MUFON has had, all the way back to Walt Andrus. I had a chance to talk with him on the phone, before he, left the organization and before he passed away. I had a phone call with him. He called up and said, what is this you're working on, you know? And I had a good hour and a half to spend on the phone with him to explain it all to him. And he didn't object to it. He says, it sounds like you've done the proper work. You know, it's a perspective that needs to be looked at. Every one of the executive directors have pretty much stated that. It's just that it's not a stance that MUFON can support by itself. And actually, MUFON doesn't support any position by itself because we don't have an answer. You know, if you think that you can go to MUFON and say MUFON supports that there's extraterrestrial life outside of this Earth, they can't say that. They have no evidence either. We're still looking for it. You know, there is no evidence. If there was, we wouldn't even be having this show or having this conversation. It'd be all done with, you know, but that's why these shows still go on. You know, if the only reason that people say that there is because they're basing it on belief, because there is no evidence. There's no evidence yet to say that there is. It's just a belief system at this point. And MUFON will stand on that, you know. You will see, you know, that they promote it at conferences, and I understand why they're doing that, because that's a little bit about gathering funding, you know. People that have the belief in the UFOs and the flying saucers, let's say, not the UFOs, but the idea of flying saucers and in ET and, you know, the extraterrestrial biological entity, the ones that they don't have to have the evidence, the ones that believe no matter what, they don't need the evidence, those people, they gladly fund MUFON, you know. So let's gladly support them in every way we can, you know. And that's okay if that's what it takes to get the funding to pay for the research that MUFON needs to do on the serious side to actually get the real evidence, then so be it. You know, right now, that's the only way they have to be able to raise the funding, because membership alone is not enough to cover funding at all. Because just to get into a laboratory to get real tests done, you know, can get into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, you know, just for one case. And, you know, that's just a hard thing to deal with. You know, you've got to get some kind of donations coming in to cover that kind of work. And there are some, you know, benefactors that are helping MUFON that have a true interest in this, but it's still not enough to cover laboratory fees. And until this gets a real respect out there in the secular realm, where it'll get picked up by a university and say, hey, we'll take that. We'll pay for that. You know, we'll cover the expenses for you. Until that happens, you know, we got to rely on the believers, you know, to help cover the funding to get the real research done. So until then,
from what I'm hearing, everything's voluntary. Is there anybody that this is like their full-time job? So you've got a full-time job. This is sort of a hobby or something you do on the side, the interest. I mean, how does? Is there like, are there people that are like, I'm a full-time MUFON guy or something? You know,
not that I know of.
So it's all volunteer.
You know, yeah. There's some retirees, you know, that are the higher ups that are, you know, that are retired and they've taken it on as a full-time position only because they have the time. But, you know, no, I continue to work. I'm 67, but I prefer to continue to work. But this has always been a second thing for me. You know, it takes up most of my second time.
So have you, when you first got interested in all this and you're looking at these books and all the things that you were talking about earlier, were you already a believer in Christ at that point, or did that come later?
Oh, no. I was a, what they call at that time, I was a secular humanist. I would say that. Agnostic humanist, I guess is what the term is. I didn't really have any focus on God or anything like that. I was just a hard worker, and I was looking for the weekend, you know, that was my focus. Focused on raising my son and, you know, doing good by him, and that was it. You know, that was my day-to-day life. So that was my perspective that I looked at this from. Okay, remember we talked about perspectives coming at this, and that was my perspective. That's how I came at this. In no way did I accept this as being real. At that time I was from Missouri. You had to show me something, and right when I came into this, there was nothing. You couldn't show me anything. Nobody had anything to show me. Everybody had a story, but stories are a dime a dozen, you know? I mean, I can tell you stories. If you want stories, I can make up stories, you know? There was nothing there that would tell me that was convincing. There was a lot of people that just wanted attention, it looked like to me. So I stuck with it. I said, if you really got something, I'm going to give you half a chance. I'll stick with this for a while, you know? But good possibility you guys are going to bore me, and I'm gonna be done with this, and I'm going to go back to my normal life, okay? And back to my weekends, and, you know, I'm going to be done with this. So I stuck with it. I became eventually a state section director for my county for MUFON. My buddy there at the museum said, hey, we got no chapter over in the county where you at. And the county that I lived in was the one where the Kennedy Space Center was located. And he kind of got me with that one. He says, just imagine being the state section director of the Brevard County where Kennedy Space Center is at.
All right, hold that thought. We're going to break. We'll come back and talk some more when we come back from the break.
The reviews for Extendivite are amazing. Here are some from Amazon. By Christine, great for heart palpitations. By Ann, before I started using this product, every afternoon my ankles and my hands would be swollen. That doesn't happen anymore. So if that part of their advertising is true, I have to assume that the rest of it is also. Not to mention that when I had my yearly blood test, only a few weeks after beginning to use this product, my cholesterol had dropped over 30 points. I'm going to continue to take it. By Croc, I love this product. It really works. By Brad, works great, thank you. Tell us your story. Get your Extendivite today. To order, call 1-877-928-8822. That's 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
Poor water quality is a major health issue, and it's only getting worse. Municipalities can't keep up, standards have dropped, and pollutants are increasing. Where does it all end? It ends by keeping the pollutants outside of your home with HydroCare's advanced systems available at Wave Home Solutions. No less than the best purification materials and processes have been developed by HydroCare to provide you with healthy, clean water for drinking, cooking, and showering. HydroCare far surpasses the competition in removing chlorine, odors, iron, lead, chemicals, limescale, and much more. Don't settle for less when it comes to your water. We'll take care of the toughest water problems for you, whether it's from a city or well source. Satisfaction guaranteed. For more information, call 888-997-WAVE. That's 888-997-WAVE. Or go to bestwater123.com. That's bestwater123.com.
Wave Home Solutions for a healthy, comfortable home.
He was the deputy director of MI6, Britain's most senior diplomat. He was knighted by the Queen and in charge of thousands of highly trained spies. But he was also a member of the Paedophile Information Exchange. He had 45 diaries full of sex fantasies with children. His friend was the private secretary of Margaret Thatcher. He strangled a child and hit another with his car. He raped young boys and organized orgies with children for other politicians.
The Enigma Channel, intelligent television for planet Earth. EnigmaTV.com.
You're listening to the Truth Frequency Radio Network.
No hate, no hype, no fear.
And we're back on the Revolutionary Radio Project. I'm your host, Rob Skiba, and this evening I'm talking with Joe Jordon. And Joe, right before the break, you were talking about how you were a secular humanist, and you said there was nothing that really caught your attention that convinced you, I guess, that UFOs were real or anything like that. And so I guess I would say, what kept your attention so that you decided to stay there, and what eventually led to your relationship with Christ from previously being a secular humanist?
Well, as I continued into the work with MUFON, I became a state section director for my county, where the Kennedy Space Center was, and they kept telling me that Kennedy Space Center had the most restricted airspace in the world because the space shuttle program was going on. But I tell you, we were getting UFO sighting reports coming in, and I had 5 investigators working under me, and we were doing reports, on calls that were coming in. So things were still happening, even with the restricted airspace in the area. And one of the requirements of being a state section director was we were told that we needed to hold 1 meeting a month at a minimum, and invite the public and educate the public, and use it also to do a membership drive to get people involved in MUFON, to bring in the membership and bring in funding, for MUFON, and help to raise the funds for, research on top of that too. And I started doing the meetings at a local library. I was getting upwards, 50, 60 people at a time in my monthly meetings. And when you take a sign that says UFO meeting open to public, and you put it on a door, you ever think about doing that?
Did I ever think about that? No, not specifically, but I can imagine that probably draws some attention.
Yeah, and it draws some strange people too. And I didn't realize how strange these people would be. And I got some interesting stories coming in from these people. Really interesting stories. And the really interesting ones were not the ones that were just people that had some fascinating sighting reports to tell us about. But the people that had reports of contact, reports of what was called alien abduction. And as we listened to these people, we started to realize that if this was actually part of this phenomenon, then what we were listening to were people that were actually on the front line of the phenomenon. These people were actually saying that they were being visited by or in contact with the people that were on the ships that we were doing reports on after the fact. Okay? So these people were the front line of the events. So I talked to my fellow, field investigators, and I said, I think we're looking at the wrong part of this phenomenon. I think we need to be looking at these abductees if we're going to get to what this is actually about. Except the one thing about these abductees is they were people that were very unhappy. They were dealing with all sorts of issues. It's like they were all very distraught. A lot of them were, I would say, almost suffering from different aspects of PTSD. They had their lives turned upside down from their experiences. Many of them had lost their families, had lost their jobs, had lost their friends, because they tried to ask for help and tell their stories. And these stories, experiences that they had were just awesome traumatic experiences. You know, these people had experiences with things done to them against their will and never knowing when it was going to happen. And this is a horrible thing to live with. And they thought that we were the experts, but we weren't the experts. We were looking for answers just like they were. So we talked about this, myself and my investigators, and I said, you know, how do we go about dealing with this? How do we work with these people? So we started kind of talking about it and figured what we would do first is put our heads together, consume as much of the research that was already out there on abductions that we could get a hold of, so that if we were going to work with these people, we wouldn't do any more harm to them than was already done to them by the experience before we start talking to them and listening to them and recording their experiences. So we spent time to do that. And then when we started working with them, we started listening to their stories, recording their stories, looking for the same things that the secular researchers were already looking for, trying to find out what we could find to find out what was happening here, trying to find out that key that would give us an answer to what this was about. But we started to notice something really strange. These people had a connection with something that we didn't expect. There was some type of spiritual connection that these people had that I'd never heard of or seen before. And I questioned it because I didn't know why they had it. And then when I started talking to them and tried to find out why it was there, the answer that I got was it was the only hope that they had, that they could hold on to, that maybe would help them. And this pseudo spirituality that they were grasping a hold of was from the New Age metaphysical realm. And then it clicked. Remember those magazines that I told you about and books that were in that museum?
Yeah.
That puzzled me?
Yeah.
This is what those were.
So
this is that connection.
So I
didn't know what they were back then, but now I'm making that connection.
So this UFO museum automatically had their New Age propaganda, and that was where people were leaning towards. They were leaning in that direction. Anybody that was dealing with the UFO phenomenon.
It seemed like the only thing that was available for these people to look to try to find any kind of help. It didn't seem like there was anybody else out there that was offering them any type of hope at all, you know, to be able to stop the experience or to be able to help them with the experiences at that time. This was 25 years ago. MUFON was not structured to work with abductions at the time at all. There was no questionnaires. There was only one person working in the realm for MUFON at the time.
So they were just strictly focused on what's going on in the sky?
Yeah, at that time, yes. So we started looking at this, and I started looking at it in depth because I figured if this was part of this phenomenon, it also had to be researched. Because if you're going to look at something and try to find the answers, you need to, like I said in the beginning, you need to have all the pieces of the puzzle on the table. You can't just look at a couple of them and push the other ones away. You can't say, I don't want those. So I started looking at this aspect too, that they were looking at, this pseudo spiritual aspect that they were looking at. Well, the next thing I know, I went sucked right into it, and it just pulled me in, you know, hook, line, and sinker. For some reason, I just went right into it. I don't know what it was, but I don't know if I needed it to or what. But I spent the next 4 years, you know, almost to the point of being a New Age practitioner myself, you know, and teaching other people about it. And even all my Christian friends, I was trying to convert them over to, you know, the New Age teachings, you know, and trying to convince them that their Christian teachings were all wrong, you know. And actually, some of them I did a pretty good job on, you know. But then at the end of that 4 years, 1996 was a really busy year. We had a lot going on. Had a couple really strange cases near the end of the year. I had a girlfriend I was seeing at the time that was working with us in our investigations with the abductions, because it was good to have her working with us, because most of your abductees are female. And the problem with working with abductions when they're mostly female is a lot of the experiences you'll hear, a lot of things are of a sexual nature that are being done to these women during the experience. And you really need to have a woman present, you know, to be able to listen to these testimonies, or just have a woman listen to the testimonies and relay them to you later, which is what we ended up doing. I had my girlfriend at the time. She would listen to the ladies and interview them and just let us do the follow-up and record them afterwards. And she was a professing Christian, where I was at that time a crystal rolling New Ager, you know. But we agreed on two things. We wouldn't talk about politics or religion. We would just agree to get along.
And talk about aliens.
We got along fine. And, you know, in our regular life and in our research. But she caught me one day, and I was really down and really troubled. And these two particular cases were giving me a lot of trouble, you know, really heavy, dark cases. And she sensed that, and she pulled me aside one Saturday morning. I was at her place, and she says, you know, I got to tell you, you really need some protection working in this realm. She says, you got a couple cases that I really feel are dark and sinister, and you really need some serious protection, you know, or you're going to get caught up into something that's going to be really bad. And I said, well, what are you talking about? And she says, you know, I'm serious. I'm really feeling, you know, that something bad's going to happen here if you don't get some covering. And I reached in my pocket and I, you know, pulled out my bag of gemstones, and I said, I got plenty of covering right here. You know, all these little stones did special things. He says, no, I'm talking about real protection. I said, what are you talking about? And she holds the Bible up and she says, it's in here. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. We agreed not to go there. And she says, but I got it. It's in here. You know, I really think you need to look at it. And I said, no. And she says, you know, you tell everybody that you're the most objective, open-minded researcher there is. I just been had. I said, all right, I'll give you 15 minutes. Well, up until this point, I had been looking at this realm now at a second perspective. Remember, I had an opportunity to look at this as an agnostic humanist, okay, when I got into this realm. But once I became a New Age practitioner, I looked at this realm completely different. I looked at it as a New Age practitioner, everything I looked at in this UFO realm. Most people never get an opportunity to look at this phenomenon from two perspectives. Usually it's one, at the one they come into and the one they always have. I had opportunity to see it from two different perspectives. Well, she took her 15 minutes and she shared with me the gospel message of the Christian Bible. Well, you know, I grew up in the church. My parents were Christian. But when I became a senior, I turned away from it. And the world ate me up. And I didn't go back. But I had heard the gospel message growing up, you know, in school when I was younger. But not like she had shared it, that 15 minutes. And I looked at her when she was finished and I said, you know what? I want that protection. And in that moment, I became a follower of Jesus Christ. I gave my life to Jesus Christ.
Right on.
That was November 10th, 1996.
November 10th,
I was 42
1996.
years old.
Nice. So now you got a third perspective.
I now have a third perspective, if I stay with it. Because come to find out, my lead field investigator was also a professing Christian. And here he was chasing UFOs right beside me. So was my girlfriend. So I figured it must be all right to chase flying saucers and all of this, right? As a Christian. So we'll just keep right on going. But I did talk to my lead investigator, and I said, you know what? I'm a really inquisitive kind of guy. I like to know things. I like to know things like right now. And now that I'm a Christian, what's a Christian? Can you hook me up where I can learn what a Christian is, like real fast, where I don't have to sit through 10 years of church services to figure it out? He says, you know what? Glad you asked. He says, I got this friend of mine that's got this Bible study course. It's on VHS tape. It's 2-hour tapes. You watch one a night. It takes 2 weeks, and we can do it at his house. I said, you know what? I got 2 weeks off coming up at Christmas time. We'll take that 2 weeks and do it. He says, we got a date. So that time over Christmas, we sat, watched these 14 Bible study tapes, and they were going really good. It was intense. Learned a lot really fast. And it was during this time, we got to this one night, we're sitting on the couch watching the VHS tapes, and the guy comes on and he says, this study is going to be about spiritual warfare. I'd never heard that before. I thought, it sure sounds cool, though. And he starts out reading this verse. Never heard it before either. And it was Ephesians 6:12. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual wickedness and on
principalities and powers and spiritual wickedness in high places.
Yeah, and as he read that, I'm sitting there, and I got this vision in front of my face, and I'm like, wow. And it was an alien gray. And as he's reading this verse, it changes into the most horrific thing I ever saw. And when he finished the verse, it was gone. And I said to my buddy, stop that tape. And they both looked at me and they go, what? I said, stop the tape. I got to tell you what I just saw. And I shared with them what I saw. And I said, I don't want no more part of this stuff. They said, what? Christianity? And I said, no, UFO, aliens. This ain't right. This is not what we think it is. I'm done with this. And they both agreed. And I said, what do you mean you agreed? And they said, well, we kind of sensed it wasn't right, but we just didn't know. So I said, all right, we need to go tell the rest of the people. So we'd planned on going in the next meeting and telling them we're not going to do this anymore. Well, a couple of weeks went by before we had that opportunity. I get this small, still voice saying, you're not done. And I'm like, yeah, I'm done. And you're not done. No, I'm done. This ain't right. Well, I'm a new Christian, and people didn't tell me you don't talk back to God, or I didn't know if it was God or not. I'm thinking, I didn't know if I was supposed to hear voices or not. In the New Age, everybody welcome to hear voices. That's what they wanted. So I'm thinking, maybe this was the leftover or flashback or something from whatever days it was. So I'm going, nah, I'm done with this, No, you're not done with this. I'm going, well, if I'm not done with it, what am I supposed to do with it? Just take it back to where you came from. Take the truth back to where you came from. So I can't take this back to where I came from. These people don't believe the word of God is that it's real. I can't take this truth back to the New Age. I said, you got to give me something better than this. I figured that would hold him off, right? About a week or two went by, and here comes that voice again. You already have it. And I'm thinking, I already have it. I went and talked to my lead investigator. I says, we already have it. He goes, what? I says, supposedly we already have something to be able to take to the world to show them that this is real. So we go and we look at all the tapes that we had done interviews with, because we used to record people's interviews. Sure enough, this tape we looked at, one particular one, it's like we never saw it, we didn't hear it, but we did, because we recorded it. And there's a guy telling us this story. He used to come to the meetings pretty regular. He worked out at the Space Center. And he was telling, in the interview, he's telling us his experience he had, where in the beginning, he lives out in an area called Christmas, Florida. It's kind of very rural. And in the early part of the evening, the dogs are very agitated. He sees lights over the tree line just before he goes to bed. Dogs are agitated. They won't stop. He goes to bed. He gets to sleep, deep sleep. All of a sudden, he's inside of an experience. He feels he's being levitated up in the air with a pole up his rectum in sheer pain, in fear. The only thing he can think to do is something that they taught him in this little church that he just started going to and just became a new Christian himself, was in a case of trouble, call on Jesus. So in the darkness, deepest part of his mind, the only thing he could think to do was say, Jesus, 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 or Jesus, help me. And immediately the experience stops and he slams down on the bed, and his wife wakes up next to him and says, why are you jumping on the bed? And I looked at my partner and I said, that's unheard of. Why is it unheard of? Because every researcher in the realm says an experience could not be stopped. Mm-hmm. And this guy just said he had stopped one. Not just that, but it was the way he stopped it. So I'm going, either this is huge or it ain't real. So I got on the phone, started calling the top researchers in the realm. I got a hold of them, a handful of them. And I talked to them. I said, guys, I got a case here. Don't know what to make of it. Can I share it with you? Just give me some feedback. What do you think about it? Is it real or not? I shared a story with them. Every one of them said the same thing. Can we go off the record? Yes, sir, we can go off the record. Just tell me what you think about it. Every one of them said, yep, we've come across cases like that. People said a prayer. People called out. Jesus called out, singing a hymn, reciting scripture. I was going, wait a minute. Why have we never read about this or heard about it? You guys say it's not possible to stop an experience. Every one of them had the same answer. We didn't know what to make of it. You know what? I would have been fine with that answer. If you really, truly didn't know what to make of it, that's an honest answer. But you know what? They couldn't settle for that answer. They had to back it up with another answer. Like that wasn't enough. And the answer they backed it up with was, we were afraid to go there because it would affect our credibility in the realm. In other words, they just decided not to tell us. What is that called?
Cognitive dissonance.
That's called a cover-up.
Yeah.
So the cover-up that everybody says government has not been the government. It's been from the researchers themselves that the world has been relying on for the truth. So I told these guys, I said, your anonymity is fine with me. I have to respect it as a MUFON member. But I can tell people what you said. I just can't say who said it. And I can take this information and I can go look for those other cases because I'm going to build this database because I know they're there. And that's what I've been doing. We put together CE4 research group, my lead investigator and I.
No,
we put together a separate entity.
Yeah, what people are asking then, what does CE4 stand for?
Close encounter of the fourth kind. Hynek and Vallée put together the classifications way back when, long time ago, for the types of close encounters, CE1, CE2, close encounter third kind, that's contact. We all know that one from the movie. A lot of you out there are probably familiar with CE5 now that Richard Gere's doing, or David Greer, or what's his name?
Stephen
Greer. Stephen Greer's doing CE5 now. And CE6, that's the one where it's serious injury or death. So CE4 is actually, the term for that is reality transformation, which falls under abductions, alien abduction. And we decided to title the group CE4 Research Group. The reason being that we went to a separate entity because MUFON wasn't organized at the time to take the information.
All right, hold that thought. We'll come back and talk some more about CE4 when we come back from the break.
Truth Frequency Radio is your #1 source for news and information without the hate, hype, and fear. We're proud to feature cutting-edge programs like The Christopher Everard Show, The Covert Report with Susan Lindauer, Enemy Within Radio with Tom Barnes, Freaky Friday with The Woo Crew, The Gematria Effect with Zachary Hubbard, America's Evil Genius with Travis Cook, Phoenix Rising Radio with Phoenix, Quantum Connections with Lucky, and dozens more. Did you know you can listen from any telephone by dialing 641-793-7117 or call into your favorite show toll free at 833-TFR Live. Uncensored talk and news you won't hear in the mainstream media. Truth Frequency Radio, your protection from deception.
A strong threat of severe weather in the south overnight. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. According to the National Weather Service, especially in Alabama, where Baldwin County Emergency Management Director Zach Hood is warning residents to sleep lightly.
These storms, as they come through at night, as they develop in the evening hours, when you may be asleep, we always worry about things like, are individuals getting warnings? Are they being notified? When they're being notified, what are they doing?
Suspected tornadoes touched down earlier in Moundville and Burnsville, Alabama. Some homes reported damaged. Forecasters say more storms are possible Thursday from east central Georgia northeastward across the Carolinas. The White House reportedly limiting media access to Border Patrol agents. NBC reports ordering them not to share numbers of migrants apprehended crossing the border, which continues to spike. Fox's Griff Jenkins is in Juarez, Mexico.
In the last 24 hours in the El Paso sector, 790 apprehensions. They're up 138% compared to last year, more than 62,000 already in just this sector on the fiscal year 21 in the first 5 months. Now, Mexican officials over here tell me they're experiencing the same thing that the Border Patrol is. They're overwhelmed. The shelters here, some 20 of them, are packed. All the Mexican officials I've talked to say, make no mistake, the coyotes and traffickers are preying on these migrants.
House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy saying President Biden should visit the border, as he put it, to see the problems he's created. Secretary of State Blinken concluding diplomatic meetings in South Korea, saying he's reviewing U.S. policy on North Korea and is considering continued pressure and other diplomatic measures. Blinken travels next to Alaska for a meeting Thursday with his Chinese counterpart. Wall Street on Wednesday, the Dow gained 189 points, the S&P 500 up 11 points. Both of those record closings. NASDAQ closed 53 points higher. America is listening to Fox News.
This is the Truth Frequency Radio Network.
TFR. Truth Frequency Radio.
And we're back on the Revolutionary Radio Project. I'm your host, Rob Skiba, and we are in the second hour of the broadcast. I'm talking with my guest, Joe Jordon. And Joe, you were talking right before the break about the founding of CE4, Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind. And, you know, I grew up in the Christian faith. My dad was a Baptist minister. I was a kid. I've been exposed to Christianity my entire life. I accepted Christ at age 7 in 1977. But about 10 years later, I started getting attacked on a somewhat regular basis by, that's kind of freaky, by shadow people. And I was calling them that before I had ever heard the term before, shadow people, just because that's what they look like. They were shadows and they were in the shape of people, but they would jump on you and choke you, try to, seemingly try to kill you. And, of course, growing up the way I did, it was a reflex to call in the name of Jesus, and it would almost immediately end whatever the encounter was. But it kept happening, and then it was not too many years later, maybe 5 or 6 years later, I was listening to Art Bell one night on Coast to Coast AM, and he had an open lines night, and people were calling in from all over the country, and some dude calls in. I want to say this was 97, sometime around that time period, because I was literally writing a movie script called The Shadow People. I'm writing the script. I got the script on my monitor. I'm writing Shadow People, and this dude calls in and is like, "Yeah, Art, I have these experiences at night with these shadow people." And I'm like, I'm looking at the radio. I'm looking at my computer. I'm like, whoa. And all of a sudden, his phone lines just lit up. All these calls came in. People from all over calling, having the same experience. And he was like, whoa, this is something. This is the first time he had ever heard of it, and he was like, whoa. And so he had this deal where he had the his webmaster or whatever set up a thing on the website where you could draw pictures of what you were seeing, what the encounters that people were having. And you were to email it to Coast or whatever the email address was. And the webmaster put them all up, and people were they're all drawing the same thing. And so that spun off like this whole, he's like, wow, this became like the thing for Coast to Coast for a while, was have all these back-to-back shows about shadow people and stuff like that. What's your take on that? Is that, you got a new book coming out, Piercing the Cosmic Veil. You should not be afraid of the terror by night. That was certainly the terror by night for me for a number of years till we basically, a friend of mine named Faith, incidentally her name was Faith. We did basically an exorcism of my house and my surroundings, because it wasn't just the house that I grew up in. This thing would follow me around. I would go on different places at a hotel or whatever. This thing would follow me around. Moved to several different places, and it moved from Massachusetts. I moved down to Texas, and I still encountered it here in Texas in 2003. That was the last time. We just finally said, that's enough. Cast us out. Break any hexes, vexes, curses, any generational curses, anything, whatever. We went down the list and just said, that's it. You're done. Canceled. We put oil on the door. You go no. You shall not pass. It was kind of our thing, and that ended it for me. But in the experiences that you were listening to these interviews and stuff, it sounds to me like the so-called alien abduction scenario is very similar to some of the shadow people experiences that I had. I didn't see alien grays or anything like that, but did you find any correlation there or any similarity there when you're doing your research?
Yeah, it's all the same source, and that's why there are so many similarities there. And a lot of times you'll see a mixture of it all together at the same time, and that's what we're starting to see. A lot of people are having a lot of the different experiences, not just one, but it's a whole mixture, all in under the whole package at one time. It's gotten way beyond just having an abduction experience. Now there's poltergeist activity and everything else involved. So we know everything is pointing to it's all the same source behind it.
Yeah. So there are other people, as I understand it, in really sort of the secular UFO world that study this stuff, like Jacques Vallée, Dr. David Jacobs, different people that in recent decades started talking more in terms of interdimensional beings rather than extraterrestrial. Like they were starting to realize this sounds just like demon possession experiences in the ancient world. Can you speak to that at all, or what are they coming to understand? As I understand, Dr. David Jacobs is one of these guys that spent a lot of time interviewing people as well. Have you had any interaction with any of these guys?
I would say more John Mack, the late John Mack, than Jacobs.
Oh.
Jacobs does a lot of hypnotic regression, and he's the one that's pretty much promoting the idea that there's a hybridization program going on.
Yeah.
The late John Mack, he was more seeing that there was a spiritual aspect to it, an interdimensional aspect to it. And same thing with Jacques Vallée. That's why he entitled the book, Messengers of Deception. That's pretty much spot on. That whole title right there. That's what we're dealing with here. And then you look at, I tell you, people really need to look at what the government is telling us, what they're seeing in their studies of the recent sightings that they're getting from this ATIP program. Listen to Tom DeLonge and his group about what they're seeing, okay? Because this is key, and I think this is something that they're being very careful about in releasing of the idea of disclosure. This is something I'm hoping. I'm working on a second book, but the book after that is going to be on disclosure, and I think that this is going to explain the holdup for disclosure. And I think this is why they can't tell us, because they want us to be able to get it on our own, because it's already there. It's in our face. We're just not comprehending what they're telling us. I think as Christians, we already have it. But the rest of the world needs to get it on their own. We can't just give it to them because they're not going to handle it well. But listen carefully to what they're telling you. They're telling you that this Tic Tac, what they're calling it, and the other objects that they gave funny names to, everything it does defies the physical laws of nature. Okay? That's important things to listen to. Because if it's going to be an extraterrestrial biological entity, it still has to deal with the laws of nature. Okay? Otherwise, you're talking about science fiction. They're still bound by the laws of science. This is where people get confused. People want to think in the aspect of science fiction instead of science. Okay? This is where this whole field of study gets confusing to the average person. Oh, but maybe they have these warp drives. No, that's Star Trek. There is no warp drive. There's not going to be a warp drive. That goes against universal physics. It's not going to happen. Okay? That's an idea that's sci-fi. Okay? And then you got all sorts of other issues you got to deal with on high speeds through space. Space is not clear of debris. I mean, we already know that just from the speeds that the space shuttle was traveling around the planet. It was getting damage to the windshield and the tiles just from specks that were so microscopic. But the speed it was going, which is nothing compared to what they're talking about, these spaceships coming in over vast distances, were doing, incredible damage. Okay? These are things that people aren't thinking about. Okay? Because they're thinking on the level of science fiction. You really got to understand the science involved. And when you understand the science involved, ET coming vast distances here and getting home ain't happening. Okay? This is why science SETI program that's still out there listening, for a signal, doesn't give this any attention because they understand all that. They're working at it from the science level. They're like, no, nobody's visiting here. That's science fiction. At best, we're lucky to ever hear a signal. Okay? That's science. This is where you got to separate that, the two sciences, fiction and real. Okay? But looking at it from the real side, if there's something that is actually showing up and showing the evidence of something that defies science, how is that possible? That you have to look at, where does that come from? That's not coming from a natural source, okay? That has to be coming from elsewhere, not other planets elsewhere, but other reality elsewhere, okay? That's when you're talking about the term, as Christians know, called manifestation. You understand that word, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we know that manifestation's possible because we've got a Bible that reaches back 2,000 years that gives many examples of manifestation. And manifestation is temporary and it's not completely physical. It appears to be physical, okay? In every way it appears to be physical, but it's temporal. It comes, it appears physical, and then it leaves. Okay? That's exactly what these objects are doing. Okay, these are not created objects. These objects are manifested from matter and energy that already exist to give the appearance of what they need to appear as to serve its purpose, and then they're gone. Where do they go? They come through the veil, right? They come through the veil. Remember? Title of my book, Piercing the Cosmic Veil. That veil we cannot pierce, but we know from God's word, the Bible, that there are entities that can pierce that veil from their side to our side. We have record of that. We have record of that. And we have historical fact of that. Vallée was seeing that in historical writings, okay? And that's why he had suspicion that maybe that's what we're seeing here. Maybe we're seeing them in a different guise, a guise that fits the culture of the time.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Do you think, if we're dealing with fallen entities, they've had a long time to observe us, and throughout the centuries and millennia, they have just changed their appearance to match sort of what our expectations are.
Yes.
Like everything was flying saucers back in the 50s, but now everything's Tic Tacs and orbs. So are they just changing their tactics just to match our current, whatever the modern expectation is at the time?
Yes, because they're here there's a purpose for why this is happening. And that's where the next question would be, well, if they're doing this, why are they doing this? There's an outcome to somebody that gets involved with these experiences, whether it's a UFO sighting or whether it's an abduction experience or whether it's a ghost experience or whether it's a poltergeist experience or whether it's a shadow people experience. They all serve the same purpose. Because in every event that somebody gets involved with, the outcome is always the same. Our research is showing it over and over and over again. The outcome is this: It takes a person's eyes away from the one true God. That is the purpose behind this phenomenon. This is why they're doing it. And they're using a means that is seductive to us and convincing to us. We wouldn't fall for fairies and elves today, but we would fall for something that is such an appearance of high advanced futuristic technology that would be seductive enough to where we think it would save our planet and cure us of all of our problems. But what we're seeing here is really not high technology. What we're seeing is really just the abilities, the natural abilities of these entities.
So,
you understand that?
Yeah. So what's your take, though, on the genetic experimentation aspect of this? I mean, like Dr. David Jacobs, others have done lots of interviews, and I'd imagine people in MUFON have probably heard some of these stories too, maybe you have as well, of people claiming to be abducted, taken away, and having genetic material either inserted or removed, or allegedly becoming pregnant and having the fetus removed, or all kinds of stuff, from the animal mutilation, all that stuff, the genetic aspect of it. What do you think's going on there? Do you think that this is spiritual? Do you think that this is government? I mean, even Stephen M. Greer in recent times just started talking more along the lines of, as far as UFOs and stuff going, saying, hey, we have the technology. A lot of this stuff could be done, it could be black budget military stuff, creating a deception. Are we talking about black budget military stuff? What's your take on the whole genetic manipulation and scientific aspect of abduction?
No, I think the whole idea of the hybridization is a ruse. The whole thing is a control factor. And I talked about this at a conference we had in 2005 in Roswell. I brought this up. The whole concept is control, is mind control. The idea of having a woman believe that she's been impregnated and her child taken, and then the idea that you give her that she's later to see the child and it needs to be nurtured. You're playing on a natural instinct of this woman that is so controlling, okay, that you've got that woman hooked. Okay, that is serious mind control right there. Here's what I found out about the abduction experience, whether it's an actual physical, real experience or not. When I first started recording these testimonies, I recorded them for what they were, just like Dr. Jacobs does. He takes them verbatim, and that's that. But I started being suspicious of what I was hearing here. Nothing was making sense. There's no evidence of anything real as somebody being taken anywhere. There's a lot of circumstantial evidence, but no real proof of anybody ever being taken ever. So I started looking at this from a different perspective, as a researcher. I started looking at it and interviewing them in a different way. For instance, Rob, you remember your last birthday?
Mm-hmm.
Remember what you did?
Yeah, I didn't do a whole lot.
If I sat you down and I said, I'm going to interview you about your last birthday. I can ask you the right questions, never put you under regression. I don't do regression, hypnotic regression. Mm-hmm. I can ask you the right questions and get the information out of you that you will remember pretty much everything that happened during that real life experience, where you can remember that all the senses that you experience were recorded. Okay? Touch, sense, smell, everything. But when I went back and I had these people, these testimonies, relive their experience during the abduction, all of the senses weren't there. They weren't recorded. What I was getting out of these testimonies, and if you do the serious research, you get only the sensational recorded things in the memory. It's like if you went to a play. This is the best way I can describe it. You ever been to a play?
I used to write, direct, produce them all the time. Yeah, very much so.
Okay.
Yep.
Let's say we go to a play, and the play, the setting is a living room. So if you go into the audience and you sit down and you're going to watch a setting where the play is the setting is a living room, you only need to put enough things in that living room setting to get the idea across to the audience that this is a living room. Mm-hmm. You don't need every single detail to convince them that's the living room. Mm-hmm. Correct?
Correct.
This is what I was finding during the abduction experiences. Not every detail was there. Why? Because it wasn't real.
So
these were plays.
So are these just,
were visions.
Okay, I was going to ask you if these are just visions or, implanted memories.
Yes.
That
the question has always been, though, who's the playwright?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Yeah, who's writing this stuff? And if we're talking about extraterrestrial beings, why would they care about a name Jesus? Why would that matter?
Well, this is the part that my partner for many years here, Guy Malone.
Yeah.
This is the part that he covered in his research. We used to do a 1-2 punch when we did our talks.
Yeah.
He would talk first and I would talk second. The part that he talked on, this is what made it the 1-2 punch, is I had the evidence in the testimonies that were able to stop this experience. But his part of the evidence was the communication. If you look at the communication between contactees and abductees that had communication during these experiences from the memories that they had, the communication is always anti-God, anti-Christ, anti-Bible, anti-creation, and a lot of the times, we are your creator.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Why would these entities, if they're extraterrestrial, come from vast areas across the universe to come here and preach a new gospel and slam one belief system when there are so many different belief systems on this planet that don't even agree with each other anyway?
Yeah, that's something I was going to ask too.
Why just this one?
Yeah, why is it just Christianity? Did you have any encounters or testimonies from people that say grew up in the Hindu tradition or Muslim tradition or any other tradition besides Christianity, where the case was the aliens or whatever were trying to discredit any of those religions? Is it only the Christian religion, or did people from other walks of life, other faiths, have their faith challenged too?
No, not challenged. The only thing I've come across with the other different isms is they were for a special purpose. Okay? They were bringing them a gift. And usually that gift was of some type of psychic ability in that nature.
Interesting.
Now, we started building our database of these case testimonies. Once we started putting it out there on the internet, once we started doing our talks, once we started getting on the radio shows and the podcasts, the testimonies started coming in. And we started building the testimonies over time. That's the database that we were trying to build to show that, yes, these cases can be stopped. These experiences can be stopped compared to what they were being said before that they could not. Then comes along the late Ann Druffel writes a book, Stopping Alien Abductions. In her book, she listed 10 different ways that she found in her research that abductions could be stopped. All different crazy ways, okay? Calling out to a higher power was one of them, and it was low down on the list. Well, I thought, that just put everything into confusion, because as far as I knew, the only one that really worked was what we had come across. Well, I talked to one of our other partners in our research realm, the late Dr. Chris Ward, and he says, Don't worry about this. This is all about terminology. And you need to understand what she's saying. She's saying that these people were able to stop an experience by whatever means that they're saying they did it, but they continued to be experiencers. What you are showing in your research is by using the name and authority of Jesus Christ and a personal relationship with him, your people have been able to terminate this abduction experience as a life pattern, which nobody else has been able to do. That's the difference. Because if people know about this experience, they also know that this continues through their life, but not with the cases that I'm reporting. Now, as these numbers started going up in our case files, something strange started to happen. People were writing in saying, I too have been able to stop an experience that way. But then all of a sudden, we started getting people with emails writing to us saying, I saw these testimonies on your website. Can you help me?
Good point right there. Hold that. Can you help me? We'll go to our final break, and we'll talk some more about that in the final segment.
Hey everyone, it's Chris Gio, founder of Truth Frequency Radio and host of Beyond the Veil. The mainstream media and establishment are running scared right now, and they've prominently featured truthfrequencyradio.com as number 89 on the federal government's hit list, also known as the fake news list, which is essentially a list of sites slated for censorship on Facebook, YouTube, Google, and other social media. Now is the time for you to get involved. Share your favorite TFR shows far and wide on forums and social media. Tell your friends and family about your favorite shows. If you're a business owner, get in touch with us to feature your product or service right here on TFR. And if you haven't done so already, become a TFR supporter now and get unlimited commercial-free downloads in high quality.
Visit truthfrequencyradio.com/signup.
Thank you for making TFR the leader in independent and uncensored talk radio. Truth Frequency Radio, your protection
from deception.
Do you want to lose weight but have no idea where to begin? The Fast Start Diet, a 3-day weight loss plan, is the answer. 3 days of nutritionally balanced, calorie-restricted meals delivered right to your door. No shopping, no measuring, and no cooking. Everything is prepared for you and ready to eat at home or on the go. The Fast Start Diet has all the amazing benefits of intermittent fasting without starving. We've helped thousands of people who have struggled to reach their weight loss goals. Isn't it time we helped you? With the Fast Start Diet, you'll lose weight and feel great.
Find us on Amazon or go to faststartdiet.com and use promo code POWER to get $10 off your first box. As a special bonus, we will include our #1 rated Lipo3 appetite suppressant spray free with your order. Whatever your diet plans are, start with us at faststartdiet.com and use promo code POWER.
He was the deputy director of MI6, Britain's most senior diplomat. He was knighted by the Queen and in charge of thousands of highly trained spies. But he was also a member of the Paedophile Information Exchange. He had 45 diaries full of sex fantasies with children. His friend was the private secretary of Margaret Thatcher. He strangled a child and hit another with his car. He raped young boys and organized orgies with children for other politicians.
The Enigma Channel, intelligent television for planet Earth. EnigmaTV.com.
No hate, no hype, no fear. We are TFR.
Your protection
From deception.
And we're back on the Revolutionary Radio Project. I'm your host, Rob Skiba, and we are in the final half-hour segment of the broadcast, and I'm talking with my guest, Joe Jordon. And Joe, right before the break, you left us on a cliffhanger. People started calling in and started asking, can you help me? And, you know, I really want you to take, we got about 27 minutes left of the broadcast, so take our audience through this, because there may be people out there dealing with night terrors, shadow people, alien abduction, what they think is alien abduction, or what have you, that are struggling and need help. And so you got the microphone, brother.
Well, we knew that this was working. I mean, no problem for the people that had given us these testimonies. We were upwards of 400 testimonials that verified that people had stopped this experience. There was nothing to say that this couldn't work for the next person. I mean, we were having people writing in saying that they had read these testimonies and they had took this to heart, and they too had stopped these experiences, and they were sharing their testimonies. So when we started getting a testimony where somebody said, hey, can you help me? I thought, this is not something we had expected to be doing. So this now turned it from a research group to a Christian ministry. I thought, well, we got to step into this. So we tried to put something together, a format that we could offer them, you know, because people like something to go by. And this is later into the years. I married, and my wife at the time had come across a book by a pastor in Georgia, Henry W. Wright, had written a fantastic book on healing. And she said, you ought to look at this book. It might help you out in your ministry work. And I read it, and there was a section in there called the 8 R's to Freedom. And I kind of borrowed it from his book and used it, the scriptural part of it, to tweak it to work for what we were doing. Because scripturally based, it should work for anything, you know, because it's based on a spiritual aspect of, you know, being the root of people's illnesses and problems. And it was kind of the same thing that we were already doing, but I'd never put it into written form. And I thought, this guy did it perfectly. So we use what is called the 8 R's to Freedom. It's on my website, ce4research.com. And it's an easy format that takes you through the steps of getting from the first one is recognize what you're dealing with. Okay. And it takes you all the way through to the last R, and the last R is where you end up sharing your testimony of freedom so that the next person can get free. Okay. You're showing that they can have hope, that this does work, and they got something to look forward to. So if you're looking for hope, if you're looking for some help, contact us, because we have a process now over the past 20 years. We've got a real good group put together. I've got 7 people in the group right now. It seems like the past couple of years, everything has just escalated. I mean, we're getting testimonies in like never before. Weekly, they're coming in. Every time I do a show, they come in. And the shows have just escalated. Since I put the book out there, I've never had so many testimonies coming in. And they're just so bizarre. The level of the bizarreness has just increased at this time. I mean, it's nothing like I dealt with 20 years ago. And the people that have come together to help me at this time is just a very special group of people. I got Lee and Mick in Australia that are working with me. Lee's handling the video work that we're doing for our podcast show. I got Corey in Indiana. I got another Corey in New York. I got Jason, my co-author, in Huntington Beach, California. I got a MUFON field investigator, Doug, working out of Florida with me. And, together, all of us have got this thing fine-tuned. And right now, you contact us. Shoot me an email, ce4president@yahoo.com. I'll get you started on health. We've got a questionnaire that's very long, very in-depth. It gives us, a background of where to start with you and where your problems are and where to focus on getting you some help and some healing. And we'll take you through a process that everybody else has already dealt with. We're not coming up with anything new and strange out of our own. We're taking what hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cases have worked with them and just saying, hey, this worked. It should work with you. And it does. And this is the strange thing about all of it. For science to work, they're looking for something repeatable. Okay? And I got testimonies that show this is repeatable. Over the years, we've had people come to us, say, can you help us? Yeah, we've been able to help them. So we've had people with testimonies saying, I've done this. We've had people read the testimony, say, I've been able to do that too. We've had people that say, I've seen those testimonies, can you help me? And we say, well, if you do this like they did, it should work for you. And then they come back with a testimony said, it worked for me. That's repeatable.
Yeah, that's
this
a scientific method.
This is the only repeatable thing in ufology. Yes. Nobody's been able to call down another spaceship.
Right. So this is truly the scientific method, right? Observable, repeatable, testable. So if you've got all of these legitimate testimonies coming in and more being added, what is the rest of the research community? How are they responding to that? What's their take on what you guys are doing?
Oh, they don't want Jesus. Accountability comes with that.
Yeah.
And that's where I was in the New Age realm. The New Age realm is very special. You get your spirituality without accountability. That's the attraction. That's what the world wants. Let me give you, for instance, on what this is all about. I came across this just recently in Bible study. It's quite fascinating. You know the story in Moses in the desert with the Israelites, and they were grumbling at Moses about, not being taken care of. They don't have food. They don't have water. And, God's listening to all of this, and, he's kind of fed up with all their complaining, and he's been taking care of them all along, right? He's been taking care of them, but they just keep grumbling. They just don't have the faith and trust like they're supposed to have. So what does he do? He tells Moses, he says, I'm going to send these fiery snakes to bite them. And if they get bit, they're going to die. Right? You remember this story?
Oh, yeah.
And what does he tell Moses to do?
Put a serpent on a stick.
Put another fiery serpent up on a stick, on a pole. And if they look, all they have to do is look at this fiery serpent on the pole, and they won't die if they get bit. And I read this story recently, and I was like, wow, that's exactly what's happening here. The world has all sorts of problems that they're complaining about. And they're looking here and they're looking there for all these ways to fix their problems. They're looking everywhere for a fix, but where? On the pole. And what was on the pole? Jesus Christ came and was crucified for us, for everything we need on the pole. That was a foreshadowing of the crucifixion, that event with Moses. All we have to do is look to the cross. And every one of my testimonies that have quit looking for answers elsewhere in the New Age, in their abductee group sessions, and weren't getting any help. Once they looked to the cross, they were healed. Exactly like the story from 2,000 years ago. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it is amazing. Why do you think this happens to certain people? Do you think there's a specific type of person? Do you think there's, is it a blood type? Is it an RH negative thing? I mean, why are certain people more prone to these experiences than others, and including Christians? Not just unbelievers.
We found that question is one of the big questions that has come up in the secular realm. They still ask that question. Why does this happen to certain people? That, and the other question is, how do you stop this?
Yeah.
Well, we found the first question, and we also found the second question. We found the answer to both. On the second question is, why does this happen to certain people? We didn't find just one answer. We found 3 answers. And it's either one of the answers, or a combination of one of the 3, Okay, and here's the way it goes. 1, you asked for it. And your people are probably going, who would ask for that? Well, let me tell you. People that are curious will ask for strange things.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in conferences in the vendor areas with tables set up with our stuff on it. And all they do is they come by and they see that one word, abduction. And they go, man, I wish I could have that experience to find out what it's really about. Dude, be careful what you ask for.
Mm-hmm.
Really, be careful. Some people are that curious that they will ask for it. They just got to know. Don't do that. The second one, which is, I believe, the most common, I'm really debating that now, because the more the cases come in, number 3 is running a real tight race for number 2 now. But number 2 is people unknowingly, and I'm going to say this, opened a door to allow this experience to happen. Okay? We believe these are demonic spiritual entities that are perpetrating this delusion on humanity to take their eyes away from the one true God. Take their eyes away from that cross. If you take your eyes away from that cross, you're going to get bit by those snakes and you're going to die. That's the purpose of this whole phenomenon. Just like in the story in Moses. Okay? They opened the door to allow the entities to do this. Unknowingly opened the door. And people do that simply by dabbling in the occult, in New Age, in anything that the Bible says don't do. You open a door. And good Christians do that. Some churches even have Christian yoga. There's no such thing as Christian yoga. Yoga is a spiritual thing that comes from Buddhism. That doesn't belong in a church. I don't care how much Christian paper wrapping you put on it. You're still dealing with a spiritual thing that's not Christian. Okay? This is how it sneaks into the church. You can try and wrap it any way you want, but it still doesn't belong there. But this is how those doors come open. Okay? Unknowingly open the door. Seriously, you didn't know better. But I'm trying to tell you, don't do that. Close those doors. The third one, which I said is I'm finding out now is running a tight race for that one, is adults saying that, I don't fit 1 or 2, because I remember having these experiences since I was a child, 5 and 6 years old. That one puzzled us for a while, but I started going back and re-interviewing the people, not about their experiences, but about their family life. In every instance, I found out that the open door wasn't coming from them. It was coming from the parents. And Scripture talks about that.
Yeah.
Scripture says that the head of the household is the father. The spiritual head of the household is the father. If the spiritual covering over the household is not there, the children are susceptible to the wiles of the enemy, just as the parents are. So the spiritual covering over your children is your responsibility. You listening, parents? It's dads, it's your responsibility. This is important. Get right with God, with Jesus, because your kids are going to pay for this if you're not. This is what we're finding over and over and over. Can these kids get help later? Yes. But these kids have come through some serious damaged lives up until the time they're adults and they finally get help. You'll hear it in the testimonies on our podcast, the horrors that these people went through. Well, they finally got help in their own relationship with Jesus. And then that cycle can be stopped.
Yeah, the sins of the fathers being passed to the third and fourth generation, but in the righteous, it's 1,000 generation. So
exactly.
you could be in that, first, second, third, fourth generation, but you could say, you know what, it stops here. Put the line in the sand, said, nope, no more, it stops here. Break the curses of the fathers and, all that stuff, repent and, get on the right path. I was thinking that, when the shadow people thing started happening to me, I had a friend of mine, his parents got divorced, and he went with his mother, and she moved to Arkansas, and he hated it there. He came back during summer vacation and wondered if he could stay and finish senior year with us. And so I asked if my friend could stay in our house. And my parents said, sure. But his sister, he wasn't doing it, at least not that I'm aware of, but his sister was involved with messing around with Ouija boards. And the very first time that entity came into my life, his room there was a wall separating my room from his room. He was on the other side of the wall. And I heard a loud boom. And then all of a sudden, something got on my bed. Was standing on my bed and then was like trying to choke me. And I'm like, whoa. And then all of a sudden the door opens, the light comes on, and my friend comes in. He's like, what's your problem, man? I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, why were you standing on my bed? I'm like, I wasn't standing on your bed. I said, what was that noise? I heard a loud bang. He says, yeah. He said, I went to kick you and I kicked the wall. I said, well, whatever you kicked out of your room into my room. So, it may have been something, kids messing around with things that they shouldn't have been messing around with, whatever it was. But, I think, like you said, unintentional sometimes, you have intentional, but also unintentional. And I think about intentional. Look, I was a Star Wars, Star Trek, sci-fi freak and E.T. and all that stuff. And we all were like, man, I want to go into a spaceship. I want to, have an encounter. So I can see how we can open these doors.
Now, you ready for the shocker of all of this? Let's go back to that Moses story and finish it out.
Yeah, you got 8 minutes.
Who were the snake representing?
Who was the snake representing?
The snakes that were biting the people. This is a foreshadowing of the crucifixion. The snake is representing Satan biting the people. Okay? The snake is death coming to bite the people. Okay? That's what we're seeing now, is this deception that's upon everybody that's trying to deceive us, is trying to take our eyes off the pole, off Christ. Okay? That's eternal death that we're going to be dealing with if we're not able to connect and have that relationship with Jesus Christ. This is that deception that's upon mankind right now with this phenomenon that's on humanity. Okay? But who sent the snakes to those people? God did. This whole thing, the whole thing itself, this whole thing, the one behind it is God. This is the strong delusion that is talked about in Scripture. It says God would send the strong delusion.
Because people had not a love of the truth.
Exactly. This is going to separate out those that truly believe in him and those that don't.
Yeah. We got about 6 minutes left in the broadcast. Any parting thoughts you'd like to share, and let people know where they can get your new book and your contact information once again, if you would, please.
Yes, you can get the new book on Amazon, and I also just released it on Kindle. There's a picture of the book. You can get it on Amazon.
And it's called
Piercing the Cosmic Veil.
Mm-hmm. Piercing the Cosmic Veil.
Yeah, Piercing the Cosmic Veil. And you shall not be afraid of the terror by night. And some of you might know where that phrase comes from. It comes from Psalms 91. Mm-hmm. And we have like I said, we have a podcast show that we air on YouTube. We don't do it live, we record. And if you have a testimony like this that you'd like to share, we'd love to have you on, because we're trying to build the database now on YouTube, on video, where people can see your face, they can see your emotions, they can hear you talk. I mean, we've done them in written form for 20 years. We've done some of them on, radio, audio recordings, but now we're taking it to a whole personal level where it's face to face. And we post them up on our YouTube channel. It's the same name, the Piercing the Cosmic Veil Show on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel called CE4 Research. You can go to that one. All of my my conference talks are up there to see. All of my radio shows, you can listen. They're up there on YouTube. A lot of the research stuff that we've done over the years is up there on that CE4 Research YouTube channel. Again, the website itself is www.ce4research.com. My email, you want to contact me, myself, and please do. I take the time to answer emails. You want help, you just want to talk and answer, want me to answer some questions, I'd be glad to. That's what I do. CE4president@yahoo.com. So I'm in Korea. Keep in mind that it may take me half a day or so to answer you, because I'm about 14, 15 hours ahead of the U.S. So, I'm flip-flopping. Right now, it's middle of the night or early morning for most of you, and middle of the day, the next day for me right now. So.
Yeah, so we got 3 minutes left in the broadcast. What is future plans for CE4 Research?
Hope to have the second book out here within the next couple months. We're looking at doing a virtual conference with everybody that's supporting of this type of this part of the research, and I'll probably be looking you up to do come on and do a talk yourself and be part of the virtual conference with us.
Oh, that'd be fun.
So be looking for my email.
Yeah.
And we want to have a lot of the testimonies on, as many as we can get on there. We want to be able to show the world as much as we can that what I'm saying here is real. We have the evidence to prove it. You can't ignore it. I mean, we're going to be putting it out there as much as we can. Eventually, maybe even by the end of the year, the third book will be out, which will be about disclosure. And like I said, as a Christian, we already have it. We know what this is. We just want to be able to take this and try and use the terminology that we need to be using to be able to show the secular realm what this actually is.
I appreciate you saying that. Because a lot of people, they were, especially in the Q bandwagon and stuff like that with Trump and everything, that disclosure is going to happen. Finally, it's going to happen. And then, was disclosure supposed to happen in 2021, or was supposed to happen back here, back there, and all this? But when you realize we're not talking about extraterrestrial life forms, but rather interdimensional spiritual beings, disclosure's been out since the Bible was written.
Sure.
It really simplifies it, doesn't it?
It's one thing to say you believe the truth, but it's another thing to say you have evidence for the truth. And that's the one thing I bring the church is evidence. Okay? Everything I've shared with you right now is the evidence for what this is. And it's free for all of you to have. All those testimonies are up on our website. They're on our YouTube channel. Take them and run with them. If you want the book, take the book. There's 60 of them that are in there, just this book. I've still got 70 to 100 more that have never been shared before that are going to be spread out over the next 2 books. I've got 2 and 3 coming in a week that I'm going to have to find a way to share those too. So how many testimonies is it going to take
Mm-hmm.
for people to see that this is real?
Yeah, somebody was like, I thought he said he didn't have any evidence. Well, no, at the beginning of the show, you were saying there was no evidence for UFOs being what they say they were, for aliens being what they say they are. You know,
Yes.
There's no solid
The evidence is
empirical
showing
evidence.
that they're not what they say they are.
Right. And with all these testimonies, I mean, how many testimonies, like you said, how many testimonies do you have till you finally say, well, I guess this is what's really going on here?
Yep.
And the answer's been there all along, right there for us in the scriptures. So, hey, Joe, wow, this was cool, man. This was good. We'll have to do more of this. I had plenty of other questions I wanted to ask you that we didn't get to, so maybe we'll have to do a part 2 or something. But thanks so much for coming on this evening.
Thank you, Rob.
All right. And thank you guys for listening to the Revolutionary Radio Project. We will see you back next Wednesday at 11 p.m. Central Standard Time, and I will be on Zen Garcia's show tomorrow for our continued study on the book of Genesis, so you don't want to miss that here on TFR. All right, thanks everybody. Have a great night.